Hello and happy gaming, everybody. My name is Dark Sage Walker, and today we're going to be doing something a little different for the video today. I might put out another video later, I'm not 100% sure. My brain always has things working, and sometimes I overload myself or I, bite off more than I can chew, which I think is an apt way to describe my channel as a whole at the moment. But this is pretty focused. I got a recent comment, and actually it was on my last Wizard of Metal video, and it is by, I believe you pronounce it Mors Domigron. He or she, I don't know which one it is, so I'm just going to say they, ask, "Hi Sage, would you make a video on some foolproof skill and item combinations? I tried a few of your builds, but didn't work out for me. Same as you, I like consistency. I tend to play melee range for some reason, probably because I'm not very good at aiming. Please keep up the good work, and thank you." Now, obviously, it didn't say all of that directly, I paraphrased a little bit, but... So here's what I'm gonna do, not only just for you, Moors, but as kind of a way of giving back to the community. I always ask you guys for a little bit of input on your builds. So I'm going to offer a few of my own that I use when it's time for a little bit of melee action. Now keep in mind, the things that I like when it comes to melee are a little bit different when it comes to everyone else's, so I'm going to be flashing up a few builds to kind of cover a few different criteria. Hopefully at least one of them resonates with you guys. If you do, let me know what you think of it when you're playing it. And hey, as per usual, drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe. We're going to get all that YouTube stuff out of the way right away this time, so I can just focus on the builds. Now, let's go ahead and just get to it. So the first build recommendation I can give you is this one. Now, Wind Slash, as basic as it is, has been enhanced since the last time since the beginning of the game. Now when you enhance it, and I'll actually just show you this real quick, it lets off these wind bursts that follow up with it, which gives it a little bit of extra range and way more extra damage. So my first build, even though I just said that about Wind Slash, I'm recommending that we take the generalized Captain's Ring build. So that's going to be that one is going to be Wind Slash, Ignition Rush, Radiant Knockout, and Frost Fan. Now, here's the justification. By using Ignition Rush, you can get close to your enemies and actually get some damage in while they're reeling from the minor knockback of that burn. Or from the Ignition Rush itself, I should say. Radiant Knockout is just nice, strong damage that you can combo out with the Wind Slash, so that'll look something like this. And then Frost Fan is there because 1, it doesn't require very careful aim. 2, it's more so there for crowd control, and that's why I recommend taking it as the signature, because it's just so much easier to use that way. And 3, because when you use the signature cast version of it, you actually want to get right up in your enemy's face and just cast it right into their noggin for maximum damage. Now, depending on what your feelings are about the Arcana being used, you could always switch Frost Fan out for Spark Array, and since we are looking to take full advantage of Captain's Ring, maybe switch out Captain's Ring for something a little bit more, all-encompassing in basically the Get Off Me option. And to my mind, there's not much that works out better for that than Terror Ring or Shattering Strike. We'll use Shattering Strike as the example. So this way you can dart into them, keep them stunned while you pound on them. And there you go. So, that's a very generalized Captain's Ring setup, and hopefully that one is proving to be useful for you. Now, this setup is very close to mono elemental, but there's method to my madness. So once again, we're going to be using the Hope Robe just as kind of a general all-purpose catch-all. And the idea is you use Flame Strike for its ability to, well, not only for its wide range, but for its versatility. Because you can just quick tap it to get that out, but you can also do that as just a wide range burst, which is why I took this particular build with the Chrono Glove in order to make it so that you can easily have access to Flame Strike's big burst attack. As means of controlling the field, you have Frost Feint, Bouncing Bubble, so Frost Feint is that one. What I like about that is that while the ice clones are on the field, the enemies, if they're closer to the clones than you are, will actually target the Frost Feint instead of you, which I think is a really helpful thing. Then Bouncing Bubble is there as as a control method because you don't need very careful aim. And let me show you what I mean by that. You can do things like that, just have it bounce off the walls and get work done that way. And both Frost Feint and Bouncing Bubble should work as a particularly strong way to hold the enemy still while you run in with your Crystalline Ballestra to finish the job. Now, you can also switch this out for, say, Bouncing Surge. I know you said your aim isn't necessarily that good, but birds are getting in on this. But think about it. Assuming that you do hit something, this is going to bounce a chain lightning between a good number of the enemies in the room and give you more time to react. Again, it's more of a control method than your primary means of doing damage. Which means that you've got two means of controlling the field, something nice and wide range that you should be able to hit enemies and control them with, as well as do big damage. And you've got the Ballestra there to help yourself out. Now, I should probably have put up some rules in the very front of the video, but just in case anyone needs to know what my criteria are, one, I'm trying to work with builds that mostly focus on melee, since that is kind of the idea here. I'm also trying to. I don't know if Moors has unlocked any Chaos Arcana, but just in case, I'm trying to stay away from Chaos Arcana. So you're not going to see Chaos Reaper, you're not going to see Chaotic Rift. I'm trying to stick strictly to just the base elements. And I'm trying to create builds that'll make the game a lot easier for you to get through. But this isn't just focused on the one person who commented. This is just something in general for everyone. So, if you're looking for decent melee builds, this is what I recommend. Now, this one is just more of an all-purpose build. You don't have anything here that's necessarily stronger for critical hit or for damage. But because we're using the Hope Robe, I figured you could take this one in either direction. So I put up the Analytical Monocle, but you could also use something that's just a general, like, all-purpose catch-all damage up, like the Amulet of Sundering or the Merchant's Cart. And the idea behind it is you just have moves that are speedy and all-purpose. So you've got the Thorn Whip in order to act as kind of a mid-range just damage dealer. Thunderline to help control the battlefield a bit, so when you dash away from enemies, you've got that Jolt of Lightning there to kind of keep them busy. Cascading Blitz just for its nice advancing damage, and because when it gets enhanced, it actually comes with its own shield. So that's also very helpful. And because it combos very well with Flame Breath. Flame Breath, of course, of course, being a nice catch-all damage dealer. It has a nice wide range, it does good damage, and it scores multiple hits. So So that should give you an idea as to how it works. Oh, and as a final note, you can actually re-aim Flame Breath after you signature cast it, so just something to keep in mind. Now, this particular setup is one where I decided to make sure that you start with the enhanced basic, mostly because you want the Vulcus to be able to bounce around between targets. And what this is doing is allowing the targets to, or allowing you to kind of control the targets just a little bit better. I left Thunderline, but you can also change that out for something else that has a similar kind of crowd controlling function. Volt Tracer can potentially fill that niche. Or I should say role, not niche. A lot of people like Entangling Vines, so you dash away from the enemies and they get drawn into you. I think that is a bit more of a advanced tactic, so I'm not sure I would necessarily recommend that, and not because I don't trust you to be able to use it, but because you might need a little bit more practice before getting a little bit too open with that one. But the idea here is still the same. You use the Razor Burst as a means of keeping enemies control behind you. That's just a big damage dealer with a shield, and I chose Flame Breath again for the same reason, because of its ease of use, essentially. Now I'm going to be moving on to just pure power setups. In this case, we're looking at builds that get the most out of just big enhanced damage. So for that matter, we are going to be starting with the Rule Robe. If you think you can swing it, there is no harm in changing this out for the Venture Robe. It's just a matter of how much room for error do you want there to be. That's why I chose Rule, because not only do you get increased armor, but you also get increased damage. Now feel free to shift this out for the Grit Robe as well, because there's always the possibility that what you really need is more armor and healing. And for that matter, I would say that's probably also a good reason to use, say, the Spirit Robe, just in case you feel like what you really need is more defense instead of like a mix of defense and offense. But either way, let's look at the actual build. So because we're going with a kind of a heavy hitter, we are taking the Obsidian Splitter with the Chrono Glove, because I feel as though that's the only real way to use the Chrono Glove. And that does get a third explosive hit after you upgrade it, so that should work out a little bit better. Wavefront. This is one of my favorite dashes, and I chose this because while you're dashing forward, that water bubble that you're throwing forward is acting as a shield, so it allows you to go through attacks and just trample enemies while pushing them out of your range, which can also set them up for your Blazing Lariat or your Obsidian Splitter. This is more so a means of crowd control while also allowing you to get close to your enemies. Now, you could, of course, use any jump. I chose Binary Splashdown because it's the one that I feel works the best for this scenario. And the idea is you want to do something like jump in at a crowd of enemies with Splashdown, use the Blazing Lariat to kind of hit in a circle around you to keep them taking damage, and then just use the Obsidian Splitter and the Wavefronts to pick enemies off and damage them as needed. Hopefully that makes sense to you. Show it to you again. Okay, I wasn't actually supposed to dash in a different direction, so we'll try it again. There you go. Hopefully that makes sense to you. Now, as a substitute, you could also use Frostblade. There's no harm in switching out Obsidian Splitter for Frostblade, and for my money, I think that works out better, but it's just a matter of whether or not you want more pure power or greater control. I'm personally more about greater control, and I think you'll get greater consistency out of that. This particular combo is a little bit trickier, but again, it should work in very much the same way. I just realized I forgot to change my relic. So let me quick change over the relic, but we are again dealing with just a pure power setup, so we'll just stick with the Amulet of Sundering for now. But the idea behind this build is to use Aqua Arc and Wave Front to keep your enemies at a distance while you build up for your Inferno Cannon and your Terror Ring. Terror Ring also works as a wonderful get-off-me option. And when you have it built up, it does a ton of damage as your signature. Now, even though this is a projectile, it doesn't go very far, and it's pretty easy to aim, so... that should also be pretty worthwhile for your means. It is, again, more of a pure power build, so you are looking to get most of your damage from Inferno Cannon and Terror Ring. Now, that having been said, again, those aren't your only options. You could always switch this out for, say, Shattering Strike or Shock Nova, or even Airborne Slam if you feel those moves a little bit more. And this one, I was just looking for a dashing forward combo attack, but you can get the same thing out of Burn Cycle. And since we are talking power, I would say the Crystalline Balestra or Glacial Cross would also be fair substitutes. Now, I'm going to bring up this one because if I don't, people are going to be looking at me like, you're talking about melee builds and you didn't talk about one of the most popular ones. So here we go. This one is very much an all or nothing. So what you're doing is you're using Earth Knuckles in conjunction with Fueled Berserk to go rapid fire punches. You're essentially speed bagging your opponents to death. Now, I would say use Wave Front because, again, it's got that shielding potential, and it can push enemies away from you in a wide range. And Spark Array to hold enemies back. Now, I put Gaia's Shovel here because the majority of your damage is going to be coming from this. And that's why I say it's all or nothing, because you're really streamlining your thought process. But another thing you could do is use Demi's Teapot to extend the length of the buff. So you can do that, and then do this, and you've got more time for the power punch. Now, like I said, this is very streamlined, and while you're going through your run, you're really going to need to be finding Arcana that are going to be better crowd control, because you're basically starting off the whole run saying, I'm just going in there like a slugger. I'm putting up this buff and just going to town. Now, of course, there are other, like, Arcana options. And some of the other options that would be particularly popular for this would be maybe switch this out for either Frostwing or Frost Feint, because those are very good defensive options. Same with Thunderline. Entangling Vines is for the really aggressive style of play with this. Razor Burst is also pretty good, and I personally like Flare Rush, because what's going to happen is someone's going to come in to attack you. You dash past them, and then you can start doing that. And then as far as crowd control Arcana, just to keep them busy in the signature slot, well, Toxic Bolus is one that, even though I don't really like how it works against bosses, it works against mooks just fine. The one thing that you need to be careful of is when you start to go slugger on them while they're bound. You don't need to move forward while you're hitting them. And that can be a little bit tricky to deal with when you're learning how when you're learning how the build works. I apologize for that. Now, this is not one that I'm a particularly big fan of, but it's not because it doesn't work, it's because I prefer being a little bit more, you know, a little bit more than single-track minded on what I'm doing. But is it a build that can work? Absolutely. So give it a try and let me know what you think. Now we're going to be moving on to all-robe setups. These are, of course, highly focused on critical hit chance and critical hit damage. So this is going to involve a lot of the arcana that are faster strikers. And in this case, we've got one where everything is set up to be movement-based. So we're going to start with the soccer cleats, but again, you could always change this out for, say, the dark katana or something else that has to do with critical hit chance. Maybe you like the assassin's blade, or maybe something damage focused works just fine. But the idea is every single one of these arcana are highly mobile. And as a matter of fact, you also, while shock assault is going off, you're actually vulnerable. Now, this is more of a retreating tactic, but since Blazing Vault now has the flames underneath it as you're moving, you can now use that as sort of your combo starter. So you can do that and lead into that. And the reason why Ice Dagger is a movement arcana is because you can still move at full speed. Matter of fact, if you have something like the boots that make it so that you can triple dash, but move way, way slower, or same with Silver Spinning Top, you can actually use the Ice Dagger to move at decent speed, since Ice Dagger's movement isn't based off of your normal movement speed. It has its own variables that it works with. So that would be an idea for a highly mobile build. Now, Ice Dagger is not the only basic that actually has the movement type on it. And I will show you. You can also get that off of, if I can find it, Severing Slash. Now, I don't necessarily recommend that because you're not getting a lot out of the damage up on Severing Slash, but it does count. It is, by all rights, a movement-based arcana. And I think if there's any other... Nope, not even in Chaos, so if you're looking to go the Soccer Cleats route, I still recommend Ice Dagger, but you do have an alternate option in Severing Slash. And of course, any jump arcana counts as movement-based, so Binary Splashdown, Heroic Blaze, they all work, but I think Blazing Vault is the best of them because it acts as both protection and a combo starter. And I'll once again show you the combo. There you go. So perhaps that'll be more up your alley. Who knows? So I had mentioned Dark Katana earlier, and I bring that up now because most everything here is going to take really good use of that. I should say half of the things here. But I will show you other options that count as melee for both basic and dash, and you can modify this as you see fit. But I like to use Dark Katana a lot myself. Triples critical hit chance for melee arcana, and both of the arcana that we have that are going to focus on that actually do a large number of hits with good damage. So to address the obvious elephant in the room, even though it calls itself a projectile arcana, Air Spinner is very much a close range thing, and it attacks in a full 360-degree circle around you. So enemies that like to get close will have a hard time doing anything about you, meaning that you're really just going to have to worry about mages, archers, and lancers. As far as everything else is concerned, you use that to get people off of you and charge through attacks. But both Shearing Chain and Tectonic Drill are highly mobile. So while you're keeping people off of you, and then do that, and then when you've got that charged up, you've got a big damage source. So you got a lot of dashing here, so you could again substitute the soccer cleats if you want. I just prefer the critical hit chance myself. Now, if it's really important to you that everything be melee based, now Wind Slash and Severing Slash are also melee based, so is Flame Strike. Most of these are melee based aside from Stone Shot, and I've actually used Bladed Vine to good effect using Dark Katana. Spark Contact functions similarly, so does Radiant Blast. I'm a fan of Radiant Blast, but that's a little bit different. It's a little bit different in that what you're wanting to do is you're needing to constantly assess your scenario to make sure that you have time to pull off the bigger burst. If you don't, just triple tap it and just get those hitboxes out there. Otherwise, if you have time to set up a slightly bigger trap, then do that. As far as, let's see, oh, and underwater you get melee from Ice Dagger and Frostblade. Frostblade, again, being a pretty good substitute for Air Spinner. Now, as far as Dash Arcana that count as melee, you don't have a lot of them. You've got Air Burst and Ignition Rush. And that's kind of about it. And for this particular build, I actually don't recommend Ignition Rush because you need to get a little too close for it to be functional. So there's another idea. Next up, I'm going to show you a couple of what people like to call the Beyblade setup. This is going to be essentially Arcana that you add on top of Tearing Whirlwind to get the greatest effect. Now, I personally like the control that you get from Bolt Rail for most scenarios. Now, it doesn't count as either melee or projectile, but that doesn't change the idea that Bolt Rail is still incredible. As you can see, it's fast, it scores a lot of hits, it just gets the job done. It's great for control. For this particular setup, you can make your dash kind of whatever you want. I went with Flare Rush just because I've had good success with it in the past, but you make your dash whatever you want for this one, because the main star of the show is whatever Arcana you're adding onto Cardus Prime, and then Tearing Whirlwind. So whatever you're adding on top of Tearing Whirlwind, and then Tearing Whirlwind. So here's what you do. Basically, once you have enough control that you can let out your big combo, you activate Cardus Prime, and then you just Whirlwind into people. Now, the danger with this, of course, is that it does leave you kind of vulnerable afterwards. So you can potentially change your dash to something that leaves something defensive behind, like Magma Rush, Razor Burst, Thunderline, Spike Trap for damage, Wave Front for added protection, Frost Feint. Like, there's actually a lot of pretty decent options for that, but I will show you what it looks like with Frost Feint. So, say you've got things under control. So you activate the Cardus Prime, do the Tearing Whirlwind, and then quickly dash away and let them deal with the Frost Feint. Now, this doesn't always work, but more often than not, you get a pretty decent control of the situation. The other popular so-called Beyblade build is what's called the Blazing Whirlwind. And this one actually works differently. You want to use the Tearing Whirlwind to get enemies into your field, and then you finish off the combo with Heroic Blades. And once again, that will look like this. Now, it is possible to switch around the position of Heroic Blaze and Tearing Whirlwind. So then, if you've got the signature charge, it will look like this. Now, I have issues with the Blazing Whirlwind setup. And one of those issues is that larger enemies and bosses aren't very well affected by any of the hit stun that these that these attacks produce. So once you land, you're kind of a sitting duck, even with the quick dash. The other option is against higher level bosses. This setup is going to be incredibly inconsistent because they'll likely break out of their like hit stun like damage time state in order to punish you for your blazing whirlwind setup. So I don't usually recommend this, but if you're looking for just a good way to combo out, that would be it. And the last example I'm going to show you of a really good melee build, again, it's a little bit of an intermediate skill level thing, but I've spoken about the Ultra Combo setup an awful lot on my videos lately, and I'm going to now show you what that means. And even though I still recommend Dark Katana, I will also show you a version of it with the Ring of Reserves, and I'll show you how that looks. But basically the idea is this. Now you can do this with Spark Contact as well, but I kind of prefer Fiery Yo-Yo, because what's going to happen is the enemy is going to get pulled back into you by the return trip of the fireballs, which means you need to be standing relatively close to get that to happen. And honestly, use whatever dash you feel comfortable with. It doesn't honestly matter that much. It's just whatever you think will keep you well protected and comfortable. So here's how it works. You send out your fiery yo-yos, and afterwards your enemy should be fairly close to you. That's when you unleash the Aqua Vortex. And as you can see, you have multiple uses of the Aqua Vortex, so you can go Fiery Yo-Yo, Aqua Vortex, Fiery Yo-Yo, Aqua Vortex, Fiery Yo-Yo. See, 228 damage, not bad, right? But that's where your signature comes into play, because we never cast that, and our signature is, of course, Tracer Barrage. So what you can do is Tracer Barrage, Fiery Yo-Yo. Or you can put the Tracer Barrage at the end. So you can go Fiery Yo-Yo, Aqua Vortex, Fiery Yo-Yo, Aqua Vortex, Fiery Yo-Yo, Tracer Barrage. Not bad, right? And that's why I call it the Ultra Combo setup, named obviously after Killer Instinct's Ultra Combos. And that's how Ultra Combo works. Now, I'll show you a version of it with the Ring of Reserves. Because now with that setup, see, I'm just gonna use it. What the heck? We can now do the Aqua Vortex 3 times, and once again, using Killer Instinct terminology, Aqua Vortex is our linker. That's the move in between the base moves that creates the combo setup. So, once again, now that we have 3 uses of it, we're going to go Fiery Yo-Yo, Aqua Vortex, Fiery Yo-Yo, Aqua Vortex, Fiery Yo-Yo, Aqua Vortex, Fiery Yo-Yo, Tracer Barrage, and you can even end it with a dash if you have a particularly aggressive dash. But that is an awful lot of damage. Now, keep in mind, against higher level bosses, you're probably not going to be able to get out all of those hits. But you're going to be able to get out enough of them to account for some serious damage. And now let's put the Dark Katana back on. I'm going to show you one more version of Ultra Combo. And that's using Spark Contact. Spark Contact can also get the same job done because it lets you move forward a little bit while you're using it. And instead of the linker being Aqua Vortex, what if we made it Fading Petal? Does that still work? It does, but you have to keep in mind that because of how Fading Petal works, it will use both of the Fading Petals pretty quickly when you tap the button. So you have to be a little bit faster with it. So you gotta go. Like that. And I'll show it to you one more time. So we're gonna go spark contact, fading pedal, spark contact, fading pedal, spark contact, and then tracer barrage. So it'll look like this. Not bad, huh? Now that one did a little bit less damage because fading pedal is a little bit less consistent than Aqua Vortex, but this will draw in and slow enemies. So if you have a Hunter's Stiletto setup, then fading pedal might be a little bit better for your means. And if you don't like the tracer barrage as your ending, no problem. You've literally got all sorts of options to choose from here. Like, especially if you're going with the Dark Katana setup, maybe you'd prefer your ending to be Shearing Chain. Who knows? Did I say Spark Contact? I meant Tracer Barrage. But let's see one more variation on the Ultra Combo. Now, as you can see, it didn't work quite as well because Spark Contact pushes the enemy a little too far away. But you can get it to work if you just make a small change. So, Spark Contact, there's that, then walk forward, Spark Contact, then you just walk forward a little bit in between them. And there you go, your damage numbers are up there again. Just be careful that your enemy doesn't break out of their stun state too quickly, otherwise you'll walk up to them and get beamed right in the face. So, that is the Ultra Combo setup. Again, there are multiple ways to make Ultra Combo work, but I think it works best with Aqua Vortex. But it is possible to make it work with Fading Pedal, and with both of them, it works better when you have them enhanced. So try that out, see if you like it. It's very effective against bosses, even higher level bosses, because you're just hitting them constantly. So that when they do break out, you should have plenty of time to break away, because these are all very fast arcana that you can just dash right out of. Make sense? Hopefully it does. And that, I think, is going to be the end of my melee build showcase. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. Now keep in mind, just about everything I showed you here can be tweaked or changed around. This isn't like a be-all, end-all of how any of these are going to work. So just keep that in mind as you're putting your builds together. And if you have a melee build that you want to send me that you think would work really well that I haven't tried, by all means do so in the comments below. Hit me up on my Discord, hit me up on my Facebook, send me a tweet. Just make a comment on this video. Just let me know some way or another. I'd like to say that I'm very open with communication, and I'm very interested in hearing what you guys have to offer. So that's it for me. Try these setups out. Hopefully they work for you. If you want me to do a version of this where I talk about the projectile builds that I really like, then let me know that as well. And by all means, stay tuned to this channel for more fun stuff, and I will catch you guys next time. My name is Dark Sage Walker, and I will be seeing you